Welcome back to Shattering Myths. In a moment, we're going to introduce IQ al-Rassooli and talk about the events of the day. But Larry has called in and wanted to make a comment on our discussion during the first hour. Hello, Larry. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Yada. Words mean things. Names in Paleo-Hebrew mean things. And one of the things I wanted to mention is you talked about Yonah.
Yes.
And Yonah, of course, means Yahweh's spirit is a dove.
Right.
My dad raised birds. I wasn't aware of it.
Yes.
He would never eat chicken. He would never eat turkey. We always wondered. One of my uncles told me, well, your dad raised birds.
Yeah.
He raised crows, pigeons, doves, even any wild bird that had been found, he'd nurse them back to health and get them on their feet. And I was talking to my dad about it, and he said, I said, what bird is it that you would say was your favorite? And he said, well, I don't know that I had a favorite. He said, but the easiest to tame was a dove. He said it took less than 10 minutes. So that tells us something about Yahweh's gentle character and nature and how much he must care for people.
Yeah, and it's a graceful animal, beautiful, and it's become, as such, the international symbol of peace. So there's a reason for all of that. Thank you, Larry. IQ, there are some lead items here in the news today, and I want to ask you if you think there's a common denominator between them. I'm going to read from the top 10 items that are being presented by the BBC this morning. Syria submits a list of its chemical arms data. Islamist militants clash in the Nigerian capital. There is a militant attack in Afghanistan that has left 18 dead. There's a terror suspect that has fled a Mumbai court. There's attacks in Yemen which have left 40 dead. And there's a blast in a Sunni mosque in Iraq which have left 15 to 20 dead. Do you think there's a common denominator between 8 of the top 10 stories in today's news?
That's amazing. I can't think of anything except Islam.
So if you were, let's say that you didn't do what you and I had done, which is that we have devoted tens of thousands of hours to studying the life and words and deeds of Muhammad as they became the basis of the Islamic scripture, and you were just left to reading the newspaper to determine whether Islam was a good thing or a bad thing, and you found Muslims being militants and terrorists, killing one another around the world, and that is the dominant item in the news, would you think you might be able to, if you were rational, pull those incidents together and come to a reasonable conclusion that maybe the influence of Islam is bad, deadly, destructive?
I would call it vile.
Yeah. Reasonable term. Let's look at some of these. Reuters is reporting that 2 bombs concealed in air conditioning units inside of a Sunni mosque inside of the Iraqi city of Samarra exploded during Friday prayers, killing at least 15 people. So what kind of an individual would be motivated by a religion, because the person doing it targeted a Sunni mosque? What kind of a person would be motivated by religion to go kill people who are being religious?
Well, since the attack was on a Sunni mosque, then the people who perpetrated were Shia.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting, of course, is in Iraq, most of the terrorism in Iraq has been perpetrated by Sunnis against Shia because, of course, the United States gave a country that was dominated by a Sunni dictator to the Shia Muslims, and they immediately turned around and have harassed and belittled the Sunnis, and so the Sunnis have responded in a civil war by killing Shia. But in this particular case, it was a Shia Muslim that killed Sunni Muslims.
Yes, it's a tit for tat. Look, this is, I'm not teaching you, obviously not. Islam is based on terror. Muhammad was a terrorist. Muhammad was a pedophile. Muhammad was a mass murderer. Since the Muslims believe that Muhammad is the most perfect human being that ever walked the earth, and they have to emulate exactly what he did, that is exactly what they're doing. There's nothing strange about what they're doing. They are only emulating the Sunnah of Muhammad.
That's correct. Yeah, the Sunnah of Muhammad would be the example of Muhammad. In the first 10 years of the Islamic era, because you called Muhammad a terrorist, and we want to make certain that we're not, being misunderstood here. In the first 10 years of the Islamic era, Muhammad and his followers were engaged in 75 terrorist raids. And during those 75 raids, there's only 2 of those battles that could even be convoluted into being defensive. 73 of the 75 were aggressive, and of the 75, not a single one of them was against a military or an army. They were all battles of armed Muslims against civilians. And in every single case, the aftermath of the battle was about looting, about enslaving the children, raping the women. So if there were 75 of these in the first 10 years of the Islamic era, is there any way to look at Muhammad as anything else but a terrorist?
I can't think of any other expression or adjective. No, I can't. I mean, he was a serial rapist, a predator upon women, a child molester and rapist again. Aisha was 6 years old when he thied her, and 9 years old when he raped her, and he was 53.
Yes.
Really, I can't describe a creature like this. Beneath contempt is not even the word for it.
Yeah. But you and I understand that he was a serial rapist, that he was a serial pedophile, that he was incestuous, that he was sexist in terms of demeaning women and violating them in every possible way. But just from a terrorism point of view, did Muhammad ever once fight a battle against an army?
Never.
Did he ever fight a battle to protect Muslims from an aggressor?
Never.
And so the fact that he engaged in 75 documented terrorist raids in the first 10 years of the Islamic era, is there any way to depict Muhammad as anything other than a terrorist?
No. A pirate of the desert, 100% guaranteed. A pirate of the desert, that's what he was.
Yeah.
He plundered, raped, murdered, and enslaved people who could not fight back.
Does his Quran say that his God, Allah, whom you and I both know is not God, endorsed Muhammad's terrorist tendencies and was in fact a terrorist himself?
Of course. In fact, Allah was a shareholder in the plunder. 20%, al-khums. 20% of all the plunder belonged to Allah and to Muhammad. Since Allah did not collect it, Muhammad took 20%.
Right. So it is terrorism existed for Islam really for 2 purposes. If you read the Hadith and Quran, the primary purpose of terrorism is that Islam was so dishonest as a religious ideal that Muslims were unwilling to work, and so the only way that they could fund themselves and their religion was to steal from others, and to steal the most effective way for them to steal was terrorist raids. So that was the primary purpose of it. But didn't it also have another purpose where Muhammad reacted violently anytime someone would say, "Why in the world are you devoting your souls and your lives to a man who is a pedophile and a rapist and who is obviously lying about this being divine revelation?" What did he do to anyone who had the good sense and courage to denounce him?
He had them all murdered. By the way, people who don't know much about the Arab of 1400 years ago, the newspapermen of Arabia 1400 years ago were the poets of Arabia.
Correct.
The poets of Arabia were the #1 newspaper people. And they condemned Muhammad. So he had them all slaughtered.
Yeah, and the stories of their slaughter are interesting in this regard, and that the conversations between the murderer and the one who inspired the murder, Muhammad, are all recorded for our edification. And in almost every case, the murderer will ask Muhammad, you see, to effectively murder this poet, I'm going to have to deceive him or her. And is that okay? Can I lie? And what did Muhammad say when asked whether or not it was okay with him and his God for these Muslim jihadists to lie?
He told them to lie. In fact, let me explain this. The Arabs of Jazeera al-Arabiya, of the peninsula of the Arabs, before Muhammad, were more honest, more faithful,
Right.
more egalitarian towards women than ever after Muhammad.
Correct. Yeah, Muhammad destroyed Arab morality. The other thing that's interesting is that there's always a recap of the murder of the poet. Most of them were women. Most of them had young children still nursing as they were being killed, and the murderer would always come back to Muhammad after having dug his dagger into a poet while she slept at night with her children, and he would feel guilt, like, wow, this was a pretty despicable thing to do. And what was Muhammad's response when the murderers would come back after having killed someone for the crime of telling the truth about Muhammad?
That they did Allah's work.
And that should they be concerned about their having committed an act of murder against a nursing mother?
If I remember correctly, he said not even two goats would hit each other for that case.
Yeah, that's exactly what he said. It is important for folks to know this, because when we see terrorism being perpetrated today, we recognize that 99% of today's terrorist acts are perpetrated by fundamentalist Muslims. They are, in fact, not corrupting their religion. They are not extremists. They are simply following Muhammad's example. Isn't that true?
That is, in fact, to speak about extremist Muslims is an oxymoronic statement. There are no extremist Muslims. Every Muslim is a jihadi Muslim. Every Muslim is a potential mass murderer. Every single one of them.
And you don't say that because that is your personal opinion. You say that because that is what the Quran says. The Quran's 9th surah was written expressly to distinguish between who is a Muslim and who is not a Muslim. And the distinction is jihad. If you are not a jihadist, if you're not willing to go off and kill and engage in terrorist activity, then according to Allah, you're no longer considered a Muslim. So according to the Quran, it is impossible to be a peaceful Muslim. At that point, you cease being a Muslim. We'll return to Shattering Myths with IQ al-Rassooli in a moment. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. We're going to stay in the same part of the world with the same religion, but turn to the next item in the news. We read also from Reuters that suspected al-Qaeda militants killed 40 people in Yemen today. And this, we're told by the officials, is AQAP, Al-Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula. I've made this statement, IQ, on a number of occasions, that AQAP, the Al-Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula, is essentially a website. That the most numbers of people that America has ever been able to identify that were actually members of AQAP was about 200. Half of them we have killed, leaving about 100, and many of those we really don't know their identity. It is essentially a website. It was founded by al-Awlaki, who was an American-born Muslim whom America killed. Do you think there's some validity to that statement, that Al-Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula is essentially a glorified website?
I don't know what the meaning of glorified. I have no idea.
I stand corrected. I stand corrected. The website is called Inspire.
Oh, yes. That makes sense now. They inspire jihad.
Yes, they do.
Murder anybody who disagrees with them, whether they are Muslim or not Muslim.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, you know who their primary enemy is of al-Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula? And it's a website. It's called Inspire, and it's the website that presents how to make a suicide bomb or even a pressure cooker bomb, and how to be a good jihadist is the purpose of the website. It's to inspire jihad and provide training as to how to build various kinds of bombs and killing devices on behalf of jihad. The primary enemy is the Saud monarchy in Saudi Arabia because they're not Islamic enough.
Yes, that's what Osama bin Laden thought also, although he was part
Correct.
and parcel of so-called the royal family. They are not
Right.
royal, they are
Right.
thugs.
Right.
He was part and parcel of them, and he wanted to overthrow them.
That's correct. Yeah, it's this nature. It's, when we're witnessing Sunni Shia kill each other in mass in Iraq and killing each other in mass in Syria. It's just that most people are unaware of the fact that Muslims kill each other in far greater numbers than they kill non-Muslims. It's always presented as this Islamic pent-up Islamic rage where Muslims feel like they've been mistreated and that they need to express themselves by killing non-Muslims, their enemies, America and Israel in particular. But isn't it true that 9 out of every 10, maybe even higher percentage than that, people that Muslims kill today are fellow Muslims?
For 1,400 years, Muslims have been killing each other. By the way, Muslims have never been, in 1,400 years, the victims.
No, never.
They have always been the victimizers. Always.
That is
1,400 years, non-stop, they have been the victimizers, never the victim.
Yep. So in the case here, I want to drill down a little bit further on al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula is a website. It is Inspire magazine. Anwar al-Awlaki was the founder of it, an American-born Muslim whom America killed with drones. You know when this brand, because America says that it's at war with al-Qaeda, and the rest of the world likes to define Islamic terrorism as al-Qaeda. Do you know approximately when al-Qaeda was first conceived?
If I remember correctly, it was conceived in Afghanistan.
Yes, 1988. That is prior to 1988, al-Qaeda did not exist. Do you know who created al-Qaeda?
The CIA.
Yes. There was the CIA originally met with an individual who was a mythical person in the sense of by his national identity. He was a Palestinian cleric trained at al-Azhar University in Cairo. And he was the person that invited bin Laden into his religious club, and it was Zygmunt Brzezinski who, when he went over to rent the Taliban from Pakistan for the express purpose of fighting a proxy war against the Soviet-backed government in Afghanistan, it was the Taliban who said, hey, there's this young guy over here that's got some computer skills, and he's been putting together a database of jihadists. Let's include him. And so they called that kid's offshoot the base. Al-Qaeda. So 1988. Did Islamic terrorism begin in 1988, IQ?
No, it started in 622.
Yes, indeed. And so when we return to Shattering Myths, we're going to talk about the myth that is Al-Qaeda and how Islamic terrorism was raging around the world long before that organization was conceived, and that, in fact, it has almost nothing to do with the terror that Islam inspires today. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. One of the myths we're going to shatter at the moment is that Al-Qaeda is our enemy. IQ, when did Islam first began perpetrating terrorist acts?
First verse, chapter 9, verse 5, when it's called the fighting verse.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been 1,400 years ago.
All right. So, and what were the first Islamic terrorists who perpetrated those 75 terrorist raids in the first 10 years of the Islamic era? What did they call their club? Did they have a cute little name like Hezbollah or Oscar Martyrs Brigade, or did they have Hamas? I mean, did they use a name like the PLO? What did the first Islamic terrorists call themselves?
Muslims.
Ah, okay, Muslims. All right, and the ideology that drove the first Islamic terrorists was that ideology written by a fellow named Osama bin Laden?
No, by a guy called Muhammad, not written, recited.
Recited, and he recited it, of course, because he was illiterate, and there wasn't a written alphabet to communicate his thoughts for another 100 years, and among the Arab people, they were illiterate. Now, so what we have here is that the beginnings of Islamic terrorism existed 1,400 years before Osama bin Laden was born. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct.
Okay. And the motivation to commit acts of terrorism, did that not begin with what's called the Pledge of Aqaba?
Correct. Pledge of Aqaba.
Yeah, could you tell our listeners a little bit about the Pledge of Aqaba, what it followed and what it was about?
Well, Muhammad spent the first 13 years in Mecca trying to convince his tribe, al-Quraysh, to believe in him as the prophet of Allah or the messenger of Allah.
Right.
That Allah is the only God that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And after 13 years of exhortation, he had, I think, about 78 people who believed in him, most of whom were thugs, his companions, slaves, or his wives.
Right.
But then he had a lucky break. Two tribes, pagan tribes in Medina, al-Aus al-Khazraj, they decided, and he convinced them, in fact, he convinced them that he is the Messiah of Islam.
Right.
He is the promised one of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
And he told them, if they support him in every way, without any kind of argument whatsoever, he will give them, in death, they will end up with his whorehouse version of paradise, with 72 virgins and all the food they want, all the drink forever. And
Right.
if they survive the fight, they get the plunder, they get the women to rape, to enslave, and to murder. It was a win-win situation. It still is a win-win situation.
Or lose-lose, because, of course, he lied. And the Pledge of Aqaba, didn't it actually say that these two Arab tribes from Yathrib, today's Medina, that they pledged to wage war against all humankind on behalf of Muhammad? Isn't that the term, that they pledged to wage war against all humankind on behalf of Muhammad?
In fact, that was the implication. Yes, that's exactly what. Because one of the tribesmen who did not like Muhammad told his own group, he said, guys, do you know what you have pledged now? You have pledged to start a war against all human beings forever.
Yes.
1,400 years ago, they knew who he was.
Correct. Absolutely. So what we have now in Islam is just a continuation of that. So Al-Qaeda is irrelevant to all of this, isn't it? Al-Qaeda doesn't have a unique, well, maybe I should ask you, does Al-Qaeda have a unique ideology?
In fact, no. First of all, the answer to your question is no. And second, every single believing Muslim is Al-Qaeda.
Yes.
They don't need anybody to tell them what to do. Each Muslim reads the same script, which is Quran, or the same Hadith, the same Sunnah. So each and every one of them is a potential mass murderer. That's all there is to it. It's not complicated.
And is there any Muslim in the world who does not know what the 9th surah of the Quran says about being peaceful precludes someone from being a Muslim? Is there any Muslim in the world that's unaware of that?
Every one of them is aware of that.
So why is it that in the West there is this myth that Islam is a peaceful religion, that the majority of Muslims are peaceful, when the Quran says that's impossible? The Quran says that if you are not a jihadist, which is to engage in terrorism on behalf of Muhammad and his wannabe God, that if you are not a jihadist, you cease to be a Muslim, you become what they call as a hypocrite. since it is so blatantly obvious, the entire ninth surah was written to communicate that singular message. Why is it that the West believes that there's this thing called peaceful Islam and peaceful Muslims, and that just a small percentage are extremists or radicals and they've corrupted their religion?
The people who say that are utterly stupid or utterly criminal. By the way, the sum total of what we're saying is this. There is absolutely no chance of finding a moderate Muslim. There is no such thing as a moderate Muslim.
Right.
That's an oxymoron, a contradiction in term. The minute
Right.
a Muslim is moderate, he is not a Muslim anymore.
Correct. According to the Quran, a moment a Muslim is not willing to be a jihadist, which is to be a terrorist, and follow Muhammad's orders and examples, the moment they cease to be a terrorist in terms of wanting to kill everyone who doesn't submit to Islam, they cease to be a Muslim. At that point, according to the only book that counts, the only source that matters in this debate, they become what's called a hypocrite. And what does the Quran tell the good jihadist Muslims to do to the former Muslims, people who have chosen to be peaceful? What does it tell them to do to them?
Slaughter them like they slaughter the infidels.
Correct. And then what does Allah say in the ninth surah that he is going to do once the good Muslim jihadists have slaughtered those who have chosen peace and have ceased to be Muslims?
Well, the ones who murdered the ones who are moderate, they will end up in Allah's heaven.
What about their victims?
The victims will end up in the tortures of Muhammad's inferno.
Yeah. In fact, Allah specifically says that I want, this is what Allah tells us, tells the jihadist Muslim, which is all Muslims, that those who were formerly declared themselves Muslims but chose peace, that they have ceased to be Muslims, therefore they have abrogated their religion, and I order you to kill them. And they need to know that after you kill them, I am going to personally attend to their tortures in the hottest places of hell.
Correct.
So is it possible to be a peaceful Muslim or a moderate Muslim?
It's impossible. I mean, we can go on and on and on repeating it.
But why is that the single biggest lie that's being perpetrated today, that Islam is this great peaceful religion and that it's only the al-Qaeda types that we're at war against? It's completely and totally incongruous with the Quran. So why does that myth still persist?
Because most people are either stupid or ignorant of what the Quran is all about. That's why 99%, even Muslims, I talk to Muslims, I ask them simple questions.
Yes.
And I promise you they have no idea what the answer is.
So from Allah's point of view, they're not Muslims, right?
Definitely.
All right. Yeah, it is an amazing situation that the moment you become a good Muslim, you become a terrorist. It is impossible to be a good Muslim and not be a terrorist. And the only way that you can be a good person as a Muslim is to not be a Muslim, is to be a complete and utter hypocrite, according to the Quran. And when you
Osama bin Laden, you cannot call him a terrorist. Osama
Right.
bin Laden was the most perfect Muslim on earth.
Correct.
He literally wanted to emulate Muhammad to the nth degree. That's why he
Correct.
went against his own people, his own family, not even his own tribe, but
Right.
his own family.
So we're not at war with al-Qaeda. We're actually at war with Islam. Is that the only thing that can be derived from the evidence?
I don't accept that. We are not at war with Islam. Islam is at war with us.
Correct, you are. I just thought I would test you on that. So the problem here in the West is Islam is at war with all humanity, including fellow Muslims. And the United States thinks that the best way to counter that is to declare war on al-Qaeda. So here you have a religion that has declared war on all of humanity and has consistently warred against all humanity. And your response is to narrow your villains into a meaningless club. That doesn't sound very smart to me.
No, it's It's not smart. This is why America is losing. That's why America lost in Iraq. America lost in Afghanistan. America is losing in Pakistan. America is losing in North Africa. America is losing everywhere in the Islamic world. Why? Simple. They don't understand Islam.
Correct.
That's it.
Now, do you think that if America were to, let's just say miraculously, that Americans finally wake up and say, you know, it's pretty obvious the problem is Islam, it has nothing to do with al-Qaeda, do you think that America could actually prevail if America were to decide we're going to declare war on Islam and we're going to use our military and bullets and bombs and we're going to fight Islam to the death? Could we prevail against a religion of 1.5 billion people by dropping bombs and shooting bullets?
I don't think so. Oh, no, you can. I mean, if you're going to have mass murder or mass extinction, you can with atomic bombs. But we don't need to do that.
Correct.
You and I...
Would it be horribly uncivilized to say, okay, we can prevail if we use our nuclear arsenal and we bomb every Islamic country and turn them into glass, no matter who we kill indiscriminately? Since that's not going to happen, since that would be grotesquely immoral, is there any way that bullets and bombs can prevail?
No.
You're right.
We don't need to do with this. All we need to do, all America has to do is what you are doing and what I am doing, but do it in every news media, in every television, and every radio station. Within a year, there will be no Islam.
Yeah, well, there would certainly be no Islam in a free society. Whether or not we would effectively be able to eliminate Islam in the countries that are wholly controlled by Islam, where they indoctrinate children from their birth, is a different story. But we could certainly eliminate Islam's ability to export terrorism, couldn't we, just by telling the truth?
100% guaranteed. We can do that.
Yep. And if we were to stop funding Islam through our oil purchases, they would be unable to export terror even from their countries.
They would be dead. They would die of starvation. They are unproductive.
To Shattering Myths, we're talking about something that really is quite profound. The realization that Islam has been at war with all humanity for 1,400 years, and that there are two ways that we can immediately forestall the destructiveness of Islamic terrorism. We talked about both of them. IQ, and the first of them is simply to have more people being willing to tell the truth that Islam is responsible for 99% of terrorist acts because Islam is a terrorist dogma. And in the West, it will be impossible for Muslims to recruit fellow Muslims when the despicable nature of Muhammad and Islam is known. Don't you agree?
I agree.
Do you think that any reasonable person is going to tell their daughter to follow the religion that was founded by a pedophile?
They shouldn't. But
right.
in the West, the trouble is at the moment in the West, all these people are protected by the Western left-wing people.
Of course.
By so-called liberals.
Yeah, but if we were to have the opportunity to educate everyone in the West as to the true nature of Muhammad and Islam, the likelihood that rational people would say, I want my daughter to grow up listening to the spiritual advice of a rapist and a pedophile and a man who was incestuous, who demeaned women, it's pretty darn slim. And, I don't want my son to grow up to be a jihadist and die killing innocent people. So in the West, you could eliminate Islam with the single most effective weapon: words wielded truthfully. But in public, mass media, it's got to be credible. It's got to be spoken by the leaders, political leaders of the country, who unfortunately now they're all idiots, by the media, who are all dupes, and by academicians. If we were to universally do that, just all of us decide one day to educate ourselves and tell the truth, Islam would cease to exist in the free world. Now, within a year.
Honestly,
Oh, yeah, within a year. Yeah, with 1 year, Islam is no longer exists in the free world, and there's no more terrorism because Muslims are responsible for 99% of terrorism. Don't have to spend a dime. All free. And all the information is free. Right, all free. Yes.
Without losing any human beings,
Right.
without losing any more money, without shooting
Right.
anybody.
Correct.
Islam self-destructs.
Correct. In the West. Now, in the Islamic countries, and there's 50 of those, the Islamic countries, there's none of them that have a viable economy. They are all dependent upon the black ooze that is extracted from their soils. What would happen if the West were to decide tomorrow that, we are going to develop our own energy reserves, and we are no longer going to buy Islamic oil? What would happen to those Islamic countries?
They will go back 1,400 years into history. They'll go back to the sands of Arabia of 1,400 years ago.
Could they even feed themselves?
No, they can't.
No. Do Muslims in the Islamic countries, do they actually work? Do Muslims in Islam, like Saudi Arabia, do the Muslims actually work, or do they import all of the laborers?
Well, they have 8 million Saudis with 5 million laborers.
Right. And the laborers do all the work. And they pay those laborers because of the oil to work on their behalf. If there's no oil revenue, there are no imported laborers, right? They're gone.
Yeah, they're gone.
And so
we're not being simplistic.
Right, but it's just simple. It isn't. It's extraordinarily simple.
We're not being facetious. We're not being stupid. We are telling it the way it is.
Right.
And it's very simple. It is not complicated.
Do you know that if America were simply to use coal to generate electricity, that we wouldn't need to import oil?
Yes, but you have Obama, who is destroying America as we speak, has been destroying America for 5 years, and he still has a very high rating. Amazing.
Yeah. Do you know that for those who would say you can't do that for environmental reasons, you can't use coal as a means to other energy development? Do you know that that global warming is an absolute lie? That the Earth's temperature hasn't raised even a fraction of a degree in the last 16 years, and this most recent year, there's been a 60% increase in Arctic ice coverage, and so we are entering a period of extreme global cooling.
By the way, one Krakatoa type of explosion.
Yes.
What do you call
Mount St. Helens.
Yes. Produces more than all what we produce in America.
Right. But you know that because the Earth is cooling and cooling rapidly, we actually need fossil fuels to prevent a unmitigated disaster. And so the short-term solution would actually be good for our planet. Well, that's the solution, ladies and gentlemen. Tell the truth in free societies and stop fueling Islamic terrorism by buying their oil, and the threat of Islam evaporates within a year. Thank you, IQ. We'll be with you next week.